What's up, my friends? We are going through our community post recap. And what we do here is we go through our popular questions in our community post and we sort of fine tune these questions. We look at a question, we figure out what answer was wrong, most popular wrong answers, and we kind of drill down a little bit deeper. These questions are designed by us with absolute strategy in mind, thinking about what could show up on these exams, and then going after it in the community posts. The feedback from our community has been amazing, so keep it up, keep working, keep going, and without further ado, let's get into our weekly community post recap. All right, which of the following best describes an encroachment? Letter A, a utility company's right to install power lines on someone's property. Letter B, a fence built by a neighbor that crosses into your property without permission. Letter C, the legal right to use a neighbor's driveway to access your property. Letter D, a recorded document granting shared access to a private road. And the answer? Letter B, a fence built by a neighbor that crosses into your property without permission. Now, 82% of our community answered this questions correctly, and the number one wrong answer was letter A here, a utility company's right to install power lines on someone else's property. Power lines on somebody else's property is known as an easement in gross. Letter C here is the legal right to use a neighbor's driveway. That's another type of easement, and a recorded document granting shared access to a private road, that would be an easement as well. So here you have A, C, and D, which are all the definition or some part of a definition of an easement. And this is asking us, what is an encroachment? So good job here by the community. And hopefully you guys can see the difference. You want to know the definition of an easement and you want to know the definition of an encroachment. The next question is, Mike, a real estate broker, agrees to list Emily's home for sale. He then shows the home to a potential buyer, Pat, but is not acting as a dual agent. Which of the following statements accurately describes the agency relationships involved? Letter A, Emily is the customer and Pat is the client. Letter B, Emily is the principal and Pat is the customer. Letter C, Emily is the client and Pat is the principal. Letter D, Mike is the sub-agent and Emily is the principal. And the answer? Letter B, Emily is the principal and Pat is the customer. 62% of our community answered this correctly. And then the number one wrong answer was Mike is the sub-agent and Emily is the principal. So something that, this wasn't a huge percentage spread. We saw more than 50% of our community answer the question. Now, just by and by, the historic averages across the United States in aggregate of fail to pass for this particular exam for these salesperson broker exams has hovered around roughly 50%. So if our community is doing pretty solid here, then this is a question that the majority of folks I would feel comfortable are getting correct. However, we do want to make sure that we understand that there will be questions like this in interrogatories where they throw around a lot of different parts and people and they confuse you. So, like Mike is a real estate broker. This person agrees to list Emily's home. Well, so Emily is the homeowner, right? He then shows the home to a potential buyer, Pat, but is not acting as a dual agent. Which of the following statements accurately describes the agency relationships involved? So Mike has some kind of relationship with Emily, the seller, and Mike also has some sort of relationship with Pat, who's a potential buyer. However, they're not acting as a dual agent, Mike, who is the agent in this question. So in this particular situation, Emily is the principal and Pat is a customer. Why? Because Emily was there first. So, Emily became the principal or the client. So they're listing the property and Mike is listing this property for Emily. But then, buyer Pat shows up and says, hey, I'd like to take a look at this property. And so Pat is considered and treated, unless otherwise stated in questions or in reality, as a customer. And this is an important understanding. You'll learn a lot of these pieces inside of the world of agency, but most agency writers make it very sort of simple and binary, not very situational. And my friends that are taking the broker's examination are going to get a lot of scenarios like this. So be prepared for these types of scenarios. That's why we generated this question. The next question is, which of the following is not part of the bundle of rights associated with property ownership? Letter A, the right of possession. Letter B, the right of control. Letter C, the right of survivorship. Letter D, the right of enjoyment. And the answer? Letter C, the right of survivorship. 67% of our community answered this question correctly, and the number two answers that were incorrect that they did answer was letter B here, the right of control, and letter D, the right of enjoyment. Now, possession, control, and enjoyment are all part of the bundle of. This is something that I teach my folks, my students, to simply memorize, as they are going to see the bundle of legal rights on this exam, and you just need to memorize them. So typically what you see the right of possession, the right of control, the right of enjoyment, the right of disposition, and the right of exclusion. And these are the 5 bundle of rights that you typically see in most books across the United States. So you want to memorize those, and you want to know how to identify ones that are obvious outliers, like the right of survivorship. You see that in co-ownership, and you do need to memorize those as well. The next question is, a tenant installs a custom shelving unit in a rented commercial property to display their products. At the end of the lease, the tenant removes the shelving unit. Which of the following best describes what this type of property is called? Letter A, trade fixture. Letter B, personal property. Letter C, real property. Letter D, fixture. And the answer? Letter A, trade fixture. All right, so check this one out. 62% of our folks answered this correctly as a trade fixture. Now, 23% of our community answered letter B, personal property. Now, here is a very interesting phrased question and answers. Basically, what's going on here is, so let's break it down. A tenant installs a custom shelving unit in a rented commercial property. All right, so flat out first, commercial tenant installing custom shelving units would indicate or scream, it should, a trade fixture. And remember, a trade fixture is considered personal property of the tenant, even though it's permanently installed or fixed to the rented property. And so long as they take it with them when they leave before the lease term expires, it's continuing to be, and they have to restore any damages, but it continues to be their personal property. If they abandon this property, then it becomes real property of the landlord through something known as constructive annexation, right? You don't need to know that piece for this question, but you need to know what is a trade fixture. Now, interesting, isn't it, that trade fixtures are considered personal property. However, here is what the test writer really wanted you to key in on. They have pulled out the definition of what a trade fixture is, and that's the answer that they are looking for. So it was no shocker to me to see a large percentage, 23% of folks pick personal property, because technically a trade fixture is personal property. However, on these exams, they write questions that are confusing, vexing, and you can argue 2 answers many times. And you're like, man, it is that, but they want trade fixtures. So the most correct answer here, without any further information being supplied, would be letter A, trade fixture. I know it's a little confusing, and this is something that leads me into another discussion, is many times I will hear, and I have over the years, that somebody might purchase an exam from one of those testing organizations, thinking that that test has got to be similar to what the real test is because they're the ones proctoring the real test, so therefore their exam must be pretty good. And the truth is, They're typically not. There's two verticals of these companies. And what a lot of folks don't understand is the two verticals don't communicate with each other. They can't do it. So the states kind of don't want that. They don't want them to be able to profit off of an exam version that would be too similar to what the actual exam is. Now, some questions, no matter who writes them, are going to be pretty close to what the actual test questions are, because there's only so many ways you can question these topics, right? Like, so there's only so many ways that you can do this. However, a lot of times those particular exam companies' tests are terrible representations of what to expect on the exam. And again, like I said, some of these questions, even a blind squirrel gets the nut occasionally, right? So like that's the reality. A broken clock, you know what I'm trying to say. So just be mindful of this stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you want to get into the closer you get to exam date. The next question is, which of the following is not one of the three unique characteristics of land? Letter A, it is non-homogeneous. Letter B, it is transferable. Letter C, it is indestructible. Letter D, it is immobile. And the answer? Letter B, it is transferable. Now, 33% of our community answered this question correctly. But look at this. 35% picked letter A, the fact that it is non-homogeneous. Now, non-homogeneous is the same as saying it is unique. If something is homogeneous, then it is similar to everything else. And non-homogeneous is another way of saying unique. So this kind of stinks because they want you to understand that there are three characteristics of land. All land is unique or non-homogeneous. All land is indestructible and immobile. So those are the three characteristics of land. Now, the transferability of land is something that determines its value. So if you're trying to figure out what makes something valuable, one of the attributes are transferability. So there's an acronym called DUST: demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. Those four elementals contribute to value. So what creates value in land? Those four. But it is not one of the three unique characteristics. And what's interesting here that the writer even threw in the word unique characteristics of land. So I tell my students, you just need to simply memorize these three land characteristics because you're going to see them. It's one of those questions where if you just get it wrong, and look how many people got this one wrong, you could be right on the edge, and that could be the reason why you failed. All right, so this is hopefully going to be helpful to you. Notice how many folks got this incorrect, and we'll see in the next one. Cooperative owners have what kind of lease? Letter A, gross lease. Letter B, proprietary lease. Letter C, net lease. Letter D, percentage lease. And the answer? Letter B, proprietary lease. 47% of our community picked this as the correct answer. Cooperative owners have what kind of lease? It's called a proprietary lease. So when you own a cooperative, you don't actually own real estate. You own a stock interest in a corporation that owns the real estate. So cooperative ownership is not real property ownership, it's personal property ownership. But what lets you live in the unit long term? That's called a proprietary lease, or a P lease. So proprietary lease is the type of lease involved here. It's a long-term lease. Percentage lease, look at this. 28% of our community picked this as the correct answer. My guess here is, and what I've seen over the years, is they looked at the two words, and many times students will just pick the wrong one. Proprietary lease, they know it was proprietary. It wasn't normal. Proprietary lease is not taught in the leasing section in the chapters. You do learn about gross lease, net lease, and percentage lease, so you do remember those. So proprietary lease, many times students are going to say, that's the odd, that's weird. That can't be the answer. It's got to be percentage lease. And this caught a lot of our community. So remember this. Proprietary lease is for cooperatives. Look up cooperative ownership. You'll see that in forms of ownership units throughout the United States, whatever books you're studying. Good luck. We'll see you in the next one. What type of mortgage loan would be most appropriate for a buyer who is purchasing a furnished condominium? Letter A, a package mortgage. Letter B, an open-ended mortgage. Letter C, a wraparound mortgage. Letter D, a bridge loan. And the answer? Letter A, a package mortgage. Okay, 71% of our community nailed this one. And then the number one wrong answer was a wraparound mortgage. And many times, a lot of times people pick wraparound mortgages. They simply just don't know what a wraparound mortgage is. It's a sort of a mortgage inside of a mortgage. You'll see this definition. Man, it's old school because you just don't see it in the field that often in many parts of the United States. But a package mortgage is definitely on there. This is something where it deals with real property and personal property. They call this a package mortgage. Now, you definitely want to know these definitions. You want to know package mortgage, you want to know wraparound mortgage, a bridge loan, and an open-ended mortgage. I would rate that really low compared to the other three, but package mortgage and wraparound, you just want to know definitions. But isn't it interesting that a lot of folks that didn't know what it was picked it as a guess? I would learn these definitions and you're going to nail a question like this. All right, we learn community post questions and we post these questions to make sure you are getting granular with your analysis. It is critical that you work on these as part of your studies, and that's why we're doing this. So if you haven't, please subscribe to our channel. You will be accessing all of these daily questions in your community posts as you're surfing through your YouTube channels. We try to throw stuff in there to make it worth your while. We want you to learn. We don't want you to be influenced by all the confusion and the noise and the constant scrolling, which is holding you back potentially. So check out our community posts, subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate you, and we will see you in the next review of our community posts that were the most popular for the week. See you later. Good luck with your studies.